Okay, welcome to the Explainer. So, have you ever stood in a modern art museum, looked up at this massive canvas featuring literally just a single, simple blue stripe, and thought to yourself, could my kid paint that? I mean, we have all been there. It is a completely natural, visceral reaction to feel a healthy dose of skepticism about these seemingly simple, maybe even kind of dumb looking canvases. But then you look down at the little plaque, or maybe you read the auction results later and you see the price tag. $80 million. When a single blue stripe or a few erratic scribbles go for that massive amount of money, it genuinely feels like a glitch in the matrix, doesn't it? It is just this incredibly jarring contrast between a painting that looks so incredibly simple to execute and an absolutely astronomical price tag. So let's dive into this, because in this explainer, we are going to look way past the paint. We're going to see that the high-end art market isn't really about aesthetics or pretty pictures at all. It's actually a highly sophisticated, multi-billion-dollar financial ecosystem. We're going to map out the true financial architecture of high art. All right, layer one, the value illusion. To really get this, we've got to completely shift our perspective away from the cost of raw paint and manual labor. In the elite art world, you are paying for the innovation of the idea, not the difficulty of the execution. This is basically the concept of subjective valuation. Take Mark Rothko's famous color field paintings, for example. He wasn't just painting squares. He was pioneering a brand new way to evoke deep human emotion through pure abstract color. So in the grand context of art history, being the absolute first to successfully break a major rule is exactly what creates immense value. It is all about those intellectual firsts. But, a great idea isn't quite enough on its own. First up, we have the gallery filter. Top-tier galleries, places like Gagosian or Hauser and Wirth, act as absolute kingmakers. If they choose to represent an artist, well, that artist is officially vetted. The elite agree they are valuable, which intrinsically makes them valuable. Add to that controlled supply. This is where dealers carefully restrict how many pieces an artist actually releases into the world. So this artificial scarcity ensures that elite demand is always going to comfortably outstrip the available artwork.
And then we have the ultimate multiplier, provenance. Think of this as the pedigree, the fully documented ownership history of an artwork. Look, if a painting was once owned by a Rockefeller or hung in the halls of the MoMA, its price floor is firmly cemented. At that point, it largely doesn't even matter what the aesthetic appeal of the image actually is. The historical prestige alone pretty much guarantees its immense worth.
Let's move to layer two, the vaults. So let's transition and see how this builds, right? How does this art function mechanically as a wealth container? Well, for the ultra-rich, art functions way less like a living room decoration and much more like a high-yield, stable savings account, especially when you compare it to a volatile stock market. Unlike a publicly traded company that can literally go bankrupt overnight, a recognized masterpiece is a proven asset. During periods of high inflation or severe market volatility, blue-chip art holds its value incredibly well, very much like gold. But think about it. Where do you even safely store a physical asset worth $80 million? You use a free port. Free ports are these ultra-secure, highly technical warehouses specifically located in tax-neutral zones. We're talking places like Geneva, Luxembourg, or Delaware. This is exactly how the ultra-rich utilize art as a portable, completely non-reportable asset, effectively hiding massive amounts of wealth right in plain sight. The actual mechanics of this free port system are just fascinating. First off, there is tax suspension. Imagine a billionaire buys a $50 million painting over in London. If they ship it directly to a free port in Geneva, they pay zero import duties and zero sales tax. Huge savings. Second, invisible transactions. That painting can be sold multiple times while just sitting inside the free port. The physical art literally never moves an inch. Only the deed of ownership changes hands. This allows millions of dollars to be traded completely invisibly, safely behind closed vault doors, without ever triggering standard government radars. Which brings us to layer three, the dark underbelly. Now we kind of have to peel back the next layer and venture into the unregulated Wild West of global finance, just to see how gray and black money has historically entered the legitimate financial system. Why use fine art? Because it is uniquely perfect for laundering. Think about it. If you try to sell a standard gold bar for 10 times its market value, everyone instantly knows it's an obvious scam. But art? Thanks to the subjectivity of price, if you sell a painting for 10 times what you paid, you can just shrug and claim that market sentiment changed or two billionaires got into a bidding war, plus you have total anonymity. Auction houses frequently allow paddle bidding via agents or offshore shell companies, meaning the buyer and the seller might never actually know each other's true identities.
And that creates the perfect environment for a scheme known as the flip and wash. It basically happens in 3 stages. First up is placement. An individual buys a painting using dirty cash in a region that has pretty loose regulations. Next is layering. They move that painting through a whole maze of offshore companies or private sales, which makes the paper trail nearly impossible for investigators to actually follow. Finally, integration. They cash out by selling the painting at a fully legitimate world-class auction house like Sotheby's. The payout they receive at the end is now completely clean capital, backed by an immaculate, shiny receipt.
Moving right along to layer 4, the masterstroke. Now, what is really interesting about this slide is how it maps out a perfectly legal, though highly controversial, tax loophole. It's essentially a mathematical virtuous cycle of donation. Step 1, acquisition. You buy a rising star's artwork for, let's say, $50,000. Step 2, promotion. You donate a few smaller works by that exact same artist to museums, which essentially pumps the artist's reputation at minimal cost to you. Step 3, revaluation. 5 years down the line, you get a friendly appraiser to value your initial work at a cool $1 million, a massive unrealized gain. Finally, step 4, donation. You donate that newly minted $1 million painting to a museum, legally claiming a $1 million tax deduction. So, the crucial point here is this. You are effectively turning what some might call dumb art into a government-subsidized profit. Because you can write off that newly inflated appraised value against your taxable income. The actual tax savings you yield often far, far exceed your initial $50,000 investment. It is just an incredibly strategic, highly effective use of the tax code.
All right, let's look at the resolution.
With all these loopholes and invisible transactions floating around out there, what is actually being done about it today? Well, authorities are finally attempting to police this financial frontier, and governments are undeniably catching up. The Anti-Money Laundering Act over in the US, alongside some very strict new EU directives, have fundamentally changed the rules. Art dealers are now required to perform Know Your Customer, or KYC checks, on any transaction over $10,000. This essentially forces dealers to finally report large transactions, closing up many of those anonymous gaps that existed just a few short years ago. Yet, honestly, despite these new regulations, the high-end art market continues to thrive. Why? Well, because of this core paradigm shift. Art is no longer about the paint, it is about consensus. As long as a group of very wealthy individuals globally can agree that a blank white canvas is worth $20 million, the system fundamentally works. It serves perfectly as a highly stable, very discreet vessel for moving and preserving massive wealth across borders and across generations. And that leaves us with our final thought, circling right back to answer the question we asked at the very beginning. When you see that simple blue stripe on the wall, you aren't looking at a bad painting. You are looking at a private currency that just happens to be printed on canvas. It is a brilliant financial instrument hiding in plain sight. Keep that in mind, and it will absolutely rethink the way you view every single museum you visit from now on. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this fascinating system on today's Explainer.